Eli had no memory of his parents, only the cold smell of old blankets and metal bed frames from the orphanage where he spent his first years. The place wasn't cruel in words, but it was cruel in silence. No one looked you in the eyes unless you were in trouble. Birthdays went unspoken. The nights were long, filled with whispers that didn't belong to comfort, just the wind brushing against broken window panes. At the age of 9, he ran away. It wasn't one big moment that pushed him. It was thousands of little ones. Cold meals, the scornful eyes of the caretaker, and the way people walked past the gate without ever glancing in. Eli thought the world might be quieter outside. He was wrong. The streets were louder, not with voices, but with survival. The clatter of feet rushing by, the honk of horns that didn't care who was crossing. He lived behind a bakery dumpster for weeks, stealing bits of bread when he could, learning quickly which alleys were safe and which ones weren't. The worst part wasn't hunger. It was the way people saw through him, like he wasn't even real. Once he reached out to a man at a food stall, hoping for a scrap. The man didn't even flinch, just turned his back, like brushing away a leaf. That night, Eli sat under a street lamp, watching the light cast long shadows of people who had places to go. He hugged his knees, trying to remember what it felt like to be held, but no memory came. He found a piece of chalk the next morning, broken and faded white. On a brick wall nearby, he drew a picture. A small boy with hollow eyes sitting alone beneath a crooked tree. It wasn't good, but it was him. When he finished, something strange stirred in his chest. He didn't have the words for it then, but it felt like whispering into the sky and finally hearing an echo. Days passed. People began to notice the drawings he left behind, on fences, on steps, even the side of a bench. Nothing detailed, just shapes of loneliness, eyes full of questions, little figures holding empty hands. And yet, no one stopped. No one asked. Eli stayed invisible, until one day someone did. It was raining gently when Eli first saw the old man watching him from the doorway of a dusty little bookstore, wedged between two buildings that looked just as forgotten as Eli felt. The man didn't say anything at first, just stood there, holding a steaming mug and looking at the drawing Eli had made on the side of the alley dumpster. A boy with wings too heavy to fly. "You drew that?" the man finally asked. Eli froze. People usually shoot him away. No one asked him anything. He nodded slowly. The man introduced himself as Mr. Anders. His voice was soft, like a blanket left out in the sun. He didn't ask where Eli came from or what he had done. Instead, he opened the bookstore door and said, "You can come in for a bit, just to get dry." Eli hesitated. Kindness had always come with a catch, but the warmth of the room was too tempting. He stepped inside. That small bookstore became his shelter, at first from the rain, then from the world. Mr. Anders never pushed. He'd give Eli hot tea, an old sweater, and sit beside him in silence. Sometimes he'd talk about books, stories of heroes who had no homes, but found their strength along the way. Eli listened, not because he understood them fully, but because someone was finally speaking in his direction. He began to draw again, this time on scraps of paper Mr. Anders left near the counter. The pictures grew more detailed, scenes of boys finding doors where there had once been walls, eyes that slowly began to smile. One day, Mr. Anders said, "You ever think your drawings might be speaking for others too?" Eli didn't know. He only knew that when he drew, the ache inside him eased just a little. With Mr. Anders' help, Eli submitted one of his sketches to a local art show. He didn't win, but a woman stood in front of his piece for a long time, then quietly wiped her eyes. That was the moment everything changed, because for the first time, Eli realized he wasn't alone in his pain, and maybe, just maybe, his pain could become someone else's hope. Years later, Eli still walked past that bookstore every day. It had closed after Mr. Anders passed, but the sign remained, weathered and gentle. He wasn't rich, he wasn't famous, but his art now hung in places where people could pause and feel understood. Eli had once been a boy the world forgot, but now he gave others the one thing he had searched for all his life, a reason to feel seen. Some children grow up with lullabies, others grow up learning how to survive the silence. Eli's story isn't about escaping pain, it's about turning it into something that speaks. Not everyone who is broken stays that way. Sometimes the cracks are where the light finally comes through. If this story moved you, take a moment to reflect. Who around you might be carrying invisible weight? Share this video, leave a thought in the comments, or subscribe for more stories like this.